All right, and we are live. I am Jimmy Waters or James Ridden Waters. This is Long Live Podcasts. We're opening a new section called Weekly Conversations with Nate or Friday Conversations with Nate. I'm not sure what the title's going to be yet. And I'm joined by my very good friend, Nate Boddington.
Hiya.
Hiya. Uh, and today we're going to be discussing, at least opening with, happiness as a negative virtue. And this comes from a conversation me and Nate were having before yesterday about virtues. And what we came to the conclusion was that the problem with the happiness as a virtue is that it wants itself in a certain way. For example, with virtues of love and freedom and strength and whatnot, they point to things in the world. But happiness is a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't point to anything in the world except itself, and that's why we labeled it as toxic in a certain way. That's roughly what we were speaking about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What? Go on, go on.
We were talking about how happiness is kind of like our internal reward system for doing things that we like doing.
Yeah.
So, you have a cup of coffee, or, you go for a run, or you go and see a band you like and you feel happy.
Yeah.
And we get the same feeling when we do drugs, like when we do drugs that we shouldn't do.
Yeah.
You feel really good and you're like, oh, I want to do that again. I want to feel like this all the time. And that's where it becomes toxic, because you can't feel like that all the time. It's not possible.
No, you can't. And that's it's the problem with because the problem with ecstasy, I find, and MDMA and cocaine and all the other ones is that whereas other happinesses, if you were to pluralize it, talk about things in the world that you receive, such as like, this cup of tea makes me happy, and you engage in the world in like a proper way. Happiness through drugs like ecstasy doesn't do that engagement. It just gives you the serotonin. And I told you about, if this is relevant, I told you about this idea that Carnap, one of the like a 20th century philosopher, as far as I'm aware, spoke about, and he spoke about happiness as not being an emotional state or a biochemical state in the brain, because if you were to posit that, imagine you were hooked up to a machine and the machine gave you the most ecstatic feeling, all the serotonin, all the oxytocin, all of it just, in your brain. And then you would, you had that feeling. And then in front of you, you got your family were being butchered and your friends were being butchered and your possessions were being burnt down in front of you. And he asks you, are you still happy? Is that feeling happiness? And most people would say, of course not. That's not happiness. That's simply, it's simply, it's simply a biochemical reaction. So that makes you question whether happiness is a biochemical reaction.
And I would argue that it's not. I would say
yeah,
it's
right,
not.
right.
I do think that happiness is a direct product of it's just a reward system, and it's a reward system in the same as all our other emotions.
Yeah.
And with our other emotions, like we think about things that might make us sad, and we think, well, okay, well, if I do this thing that I don't want to do, I'm gonna be sad. But we don't want to be sad all the time, and we also don't want to be angry all the time, and we don't want to be anxious all the time. We don't want to be depressed all the time. But for some reason, we expect to be happy all the time.
Yeah. And we were talking about, if I can get my head wrapped around this, happiness is it is something that we are always striving for, and it's not. And we choose to categorize happiness as something separate from the things that you enjoy. And we end up reaching towards happiness. I don't reach towards a walk. I reach towards a walk because it will make me happy. I don't reach for that cup of coffee. I reach that cup of coffee because it makes me happy. And then this completely blows out your actual engagement in the world, because you're now separating happiness as a separate experience from what makes you happy, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. And you were saying the other day that that a lot of happiness, quote unquote, is the journey. It's the journey you take on the road to being
Of course,
happy.
yeah.
But
Exactly.
when you finish a cup of coffee, you feel satisfied because you had your cup of coffee and now it's gone. Or you'll have another one and then you'll be satisfied.
Yeah.
Or you have an orgasm and afterwards, you you feel good. You're not sad. You're not sad because you're not having an orgasm anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is, if you were to identify rationally and lingually that your happiness was obtained through having sex or having the cup of coffee or having food, then you will make yourself sad because you're no longer having that experience. But that experience, that reaction you've done to yourself, and it's purely a lingual reaction because you've decided to call the action of having sex happiness. And like you say, it's the journey. It's the journey towards something, and the ebb and flow of things that naturally not only gives off happiness, but all the other emotions that one person does and should experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry if my coughing is clipping the mic, by the way.
It's okay, man. You're like you're in a constant state of coughing all the time. It's
my bloody smoking habit. It's just quite terrible. So yeah, it is. Yeah. So I guess what you should say. I guess the ideal is to come up with a solution to no longer talk about happiness in a certain way, and the question of, is happiness a useful not only emotion but experience and sort of state of being to even communicate to other people, or does it impair us and lead us to more unhappiness? And that's kind of the question I want to ask you.
Okay, well, my advice would be to not think of happiness as something that you're striving for.
Yeah.
To think of it as something that you appreciate when you have.
Mm-hmm.
And to also appreciate all your other emotions, because all those other emotions have opposites, and you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're sorry.
Go on. No, go on.
And if you're always striving to be happy, then you never will be.
Yeah. And it's what Alan Watts refers to as the backwards law, anyway, because we were saying over the phone just before we started this podcast that, like, it's ironic that if you want to be sad, you're going to make yourself sad. If you want to be angry, you're going to make yourself angry. If you want to be scared, you're going to make yourself scared. But if you want to be happy, you're going to make yourself sad. Wanting to be happy actually does the opposite of what the rest, which is why it sort of further sort of illustrates that it is that kind of odd one out. It's that kind of emotion that just doesn't quite fit the other ones. It's true.
And you were saying yesterday that when you actually think about, like, striving for happiness, it doesn't make you happy.
No.
It makes you sad because you're not there.
Yeah. Exactly.
And like, I think what our argument is that happiness as a as a state of mind, rather than just being labeled as an emotion like sadness or
like a biochemical reaction, sure.
As something you feel all the time, does not and will never exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I mean, another thing I was going to say, and I said yesterday to you on the phone, was who's to say that having sex, eating food, and drinking coffee and listening to a good song are even all the same emotion? The only reason they're the same emotion is because we want to have more of them. And this goes back to the whole concept of happiness just simply not being an emotion, but just something wanting more of something. And you really think, you really think about it, and you just end up thinking, like, what, if you want, how can you want happiness? What do you mean? Because you're always
it's very selective, isn't it?
Yeah,
we sort of decide what we want to make us happy at that time.
Exactly, and that's the way. That's the way it should be. Do you want to be happy about being in the world and being alive? If so, you're still being happy about something. And this is the real paradox of taking drugs that boost your serotonin, is because it kind of blows that all apart, because you're no longer focused. You're no longer striving for happiness because, I'm in the world, or I'm alive. You're happy because you're just buzzing in your head, and you're just like, I mean, obviously,
it's like, instead of finding happiness in the little things in your life that you get enjoyment from, you're getting happiness from everything.
Yeah.
It's not real. It's not like,
exactly.
It's artificial. And that's why when you have a come down the next day and you're thinking about the world, you're really cynical and really negative, because you don't feel that way about everything anymore.
No, and you're actually the opposite about everything. And yeah, I mean, my history, I took a lot of ecstasy in 2016. I got very skinny, and
Me too.
and I mean, I had some. I had some, some. It really blew apart my perception of the world because, like, I not only suffered incredible depression for a long time as a result of taking ecstasy, which I'm still having to face with all the time. I'm still like, having to fight depression, which is fine, and I'm doing a very good job at it, should I say? But yeah, it is interesting how, I mean, if we were to move the conversation on a bit, it is interesting how, being so happy for such an amount, being so happy for like a few nights can completely fuck with your serotonin, and it can lead you to, you get serotonin syndrome, you get depression, you get anxiety, and in my case, you get psychotic delusion, which never really went away because I still take medication for chronic psychosis and all of that.
Serotonin syndrome is fatal as well.
Exactly,
It completely destroys your reward system that we were talking about earlier. That you eat, when you eat something, you feel satisfied, and you feel satisfied for a reason, because it creates that need for more.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I want to eat more later because I'll be hungry later. But without that, that desire, you won't eat. You'll literally go days without the desire to eat, or you'll feel a pain in your stomach and you'll know you're hungry, but you won't have the desire to get rid of it.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to, like, we and I talk about this in my book about how we have concepts and conceptual lines that exist at like adjacent angles to each other, and one of the ones I want to speak, for example, we speak of time, and in our culture we have the adjacent conceptual line as efficiency. So with time we want to be more efficient, and with happiness we have it as goodness. And the problem with happiness always being equated to goodness is that it implies that the other emotions are bad and they should be done away with, as we were talking about. So we end up saying that, like, sadness isn't a very perfectly adequate and appropriate reaction to something, but something that isn't making me feel good, so I should do away with it. When obviously, evolutionarily, being sad and being afraid of predators and other people who might seek to kill you or hurt you, is a very good reaction, and that's still a present reaction in our everyday world. If you're scared of someone, we have the response to stay the fuck away from that person.
Yeah, and I mean, it's literally like the easiest way to explain it is just because something makes you feel bad doesn't mean it is bad.
No, exactly, and doesn't mean that.
And that's evidently clear when you look at other people who experience things in a different way to you. I mean, like, what's scary to one person isn't to another.
Yeah.
And then you have to question, is like, oh, well, is being sad the correct way to think about the situation, or is being scared the correct way to think about this question? There is no correct way.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, like, yeah. So the interesting thing is, like, when you do end up sort of feeling sad, there is that immediate there's the immediate response to sort of do away with it. And the problem is that we still, despite feeling sadness and knowing that it might be good for us, we still don't really put forward that rationality to be like, right, this is a good emotion, and we don't let ourselves feel sad. We have this horrible culture of forced positivity, of like good vibes only, and it's bloody awful for the sake of actually living properly and living, not to just sort of like bring out a philosopher to show that I've read philosophy, because I haven't read much philosophy, but Nietzsche talks very obviously about, like, he says how much of a denial of life it is to not be completely at one with your suffering and to let yourself suffer. And he says, that he talks about the religion of comfortableness. And people who don't experience the highest of heights and the lowest of lows are the most deprived of living properly, like living as creatures, as living creatures, rather than, people constantly striving for one thing and trying to suppress the other emotion. Does that? Yeah, I hope that makes sense. But like, yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. And See, I kind of agree, but in the same breath, I think that like I don't think that forcing positivity is necessarily healthy, but I do think that trying to think about things positively has a positive impact on
Yeah.
you and others. And
Yeah, yeah.
actually that works in a circle because if you make the people around you happy, they
Yeah.
make you happy.
Yeah,
And
yeah, 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 yeah.
that
It's not a zero-sum
but
game.
but you're still being made happy by those situations. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
it's not a complete, oh, I'm happy now because I have a good circle of friends and I have a good relationship and I have a good relationship with my
Yeah, right.
family.
Yep.
You're yeah. You
Yeah, right.
you but I do think that being positive is good, and I think that like change it, like there's a really great saying, you can't move a mountain but you can change the way you view it, and I've
Yeah.
always loved that
We
because
we this is a great topic of conversation actually. Sorry, let me finish first. Finish first.
I know
Finish
that
what
was that's it,
you were
yeah,
done. You were done.
yeah.
I was talking about my book with Manny, my friend Anthony, who's the vocalist of our band and a very good friend of ours, and he was talking about a story about a man who wanted. He was a man who wanted to eliminate suffering, so he spent his entire life trying to solve suffering and make everyone's lives so they were devoid of suffering. And then when he died, there was still suffering, and that's the problem. And you're familiar with utilitarianism, right? Because I talk about it. I talk about it a bit. Utilitarianism is the view that um, one should make things. The moral duty is moral goodness is making as many people as happy as possible. And I have a story about when I was in a philosophy lecture in Finland, and he spoke about utilitarianism. It's a bit more complicated than just simply how I was putting it, but pretty much it is just like most people, the most happy. And at the end, I sort of spoke to him and said, "Well, if surely the utilitarian then views the world as as one thing existing in the world, unhappiness and unpleasure, displeasure, and it must not exist, and it definitely must not exist, and yet it does exist, and so it's just this big tragedy of the world that one half of the world is completely awful and infinitely bad and should never exist but does exist." And his response was something like, "Well, if you don't like it, then you shouldn't do philosophy," which is just
That's so stupid. I hate
that's
that.
crazy. It's
And it's
crazy, isn't
and
it?
it's a ludicrous idea anyway, because no matter how much you wish something away or pray something away, you can't you can't make something not exist if it
No,
exists.
exactly. And we need to focus on like
And if something does exist or did exist, it has the potential to come back. So I don't, yeah, I don't get it.
it was the strangest thing because like not only is it kind of like that's roughly what he said. I think. It may have like gone like Chinese whispered down the line, but he did say something like, if you don't like it, then sorry, maybe philosophy isn't your thing. And it's just like, well, how about fuck the utilitarian view of constantly making people happy? I mean, I write, there's a problem with us always trying to make things better, isn't there? That we are always on the we're always on this obsessive path to make things better all the time, and it's existent in politics and meme
Yeah,
wars on Facebook,
because
online.
it
People,
insinuates that something's wrong.
yes, exactly, and
Yeah.
and 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 not only is it stupid to do that because when you think of like colonialism and think of imperialism and scientific breakthrough and like scientific industrialization and the invention of the nuclear bomb, which in the attempt to create peace, which is just the craziest thing that's ever been conceived. But
Yeah.
um, but it's also like quite to another extent it's also very arrogant because it's like it's even people talking on Facebook to try and affirm what worldview to have, and I see this constantly. I see people, and I'm not saying they're always wrong. I'm just saying it's like it's kind of misplaced conceitedness, and that people are constantly trying to perfect and amend and justify, not justify like justify their own viewpoint on what the right way to act in the world is, and it's based on all these assumptions about other people's motives, which just doesn't really make any sense in reality. And
Yeah, I must
do
admit,
you know what I mean? You know what I
I
mean? I mean,
must admit, like I live in a very, very leftist place. Well, I mean,
yeah, yeah,
not so much anymore because I've moved like an hour out of the city, but in the city,
Nate's from
Jesus.
Brighton, just to
It's
let
it's
everyone know.
it's so left,
UK.
and the problem with that, I find, is that anybody who has any kind of other view gets shut down immediately and is just not allowed to talk. And I don't agree. And I don't agree with that.
I mean, for the record, like obviously things are very complicated, but I'm quite leftist on a lot of opinions. But I completely agree with you. I do find that like there are there are many opinions, and there is a sort of lack of ability to have a conversation about a lot of things, which is just the I don't want to sound like a right wing podcaster as I'm talking about, but it is true. I mean, there's there's a people there's a lot of like it's not only lacking in conversation, but also I mean from both sides, not just leftism but rightism, and a lot of conservatives have this problem as well.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of rightists will just be like, "Oh, I'm not having this conversation with you."
Exactly. Yeah.
And then a lot of leftists will get angry and defensive and upset, and they'll like scream their ideas at someone, trying to force their opinion down that person's throat, and they're just like, "I'm not having this."
I was having this conversation.
And I don't even think it's because of their like it's not always because of their different viewpoints. I think that there are like designated like personalities that are manifested in each side of the spectrum.
And it does come a lot down to psychological personality. For example, and ideologies behind them. For example, forget that example. But like, I was talking to Jack about just the ability to know when to shut the fuck up, like,
Yeah.
and like, because we're I was talking about like, we don't know the other person's perspective almost all of the time. And we still try and affirm. And the problem with tolerance is that it's a kind of negative, like conceptually negative, because to say you're tolerating another person's opinion is to say you're putting up with it. If it was positive, you'd actually, it should be considered more positively, as in like I'm actually going to listen to what this person's telling me,
and accept that it's just as valid.
And it's just as valid. Exactly. Yeah. And it might not. I mean, it might not be as true, but Jesus Christ, we never take the opportunity to actually listen to the person. We just say, oh, you're entitled to your opinion, I guess. And the weird thing is that tolerating the other person's perspective not only is just putting up with it, but it also affirms you as, oh, look at me, I'm a tolerant person. I'm able to put up with this person's opinion even though they're wrong. And you don't know that they're wrong because you haven't properly considered it. And you don't know the assumptions behind what they're talking about because you're too blinded by your own assumptions, which you don't inspect. So there's just that lacking of understanding, of taking the time to consider the other person's perspective, because you know, and I get this all the time. I get this with various people, and I'm not saying that every opinion's correct or every opinion is valid, because that's not true. But just to have such a secure and almost like sort of like suffocating framework of opinions,
it does make I do feel like it makes a person look incredibly fragile, and it almost makes a person look as if they don't truly believe everything they believe, if they're so willing to completely shove someone away when someone else has an opinion that differs theirs. And I remember I had an argument years and years ago with some people. I'm not going to mention any names. They're actually really good friends of mine. Hi guys, if you're watching this. I am very much on the sort of, because this is like a feminist argument, and I very strongly believe that if someone accuses someone of sexual assault, that both parties should be treated equally.
Okay.
Because we can't just make assumptions. There has to be evidence. There has to be proof. They can't just put someone in prison just because someone said that something happened.
Sure.
And in the same breath, we shouldn't just we should believe someone if they tell us that they've been assaulted, and we should support them. And
obviously, and obviously it's a bloody awful.
But I said this, and I was treated like a heretic, like, you're just a dickhead, you're a cunt, you always take the girl's side. I'm like, yeah, but what what if the girl is lying? Like, there is a chance that she could be lying, and then some poor guy goes to prison for fucking 6 years for something he didn't do.
It's
And
a very, it's a,
how
it's
can
a,
you
it's, I
not?
think,
How
yeah,
did you? How is that okay? I'm sorry.
it's a very delicate. I mean, I want to say it's a very delicate topic, and I think that sexual assault is one of the worst things someone can go through.
It's terrible, and
Exactly.
it is the worst thing.
It's one of the worst things because
I think
definitely.
I think some people are more affected by sexual assault than you think.
Yeah.
I think like maybe 2 out of 20 people I meet have been sexually assaulted in some way, and it is the most heartbreaking, heart-wrenching thing. It's awful. It completely changes a person overnight like that. It's just
It's terrible. Yeah.
And it's awful. But
I mean, I've go on.
I can't turn a blind eye and say that, you know, going to prison for something that you didn't do, or having your reputation destroyed and everyone thinking that you're a rapist. I can't say that's not awful. That's awful too. That's an awful thing to go through. Imagine you're just a perfectly, you know, upstanding member of society, and then suddenly someone tells this enormous lie about you, and now your entire reputation is ruined. You lose your job. You're unemployable. All your friends hate you. Your family turn their backs on you. You might be facing a court case. You might go to prison, and then suddenly you're in prison with a bunch of sex criminals, and that's who you get to spend your time with, and you didn't even do anything. And I don't think that, like, I think a lot of people don't take that seriously.
I'm not knowledgeable enough to know what the percentage of.
It's not reliable. Anyone that tries to tell you, like, there is so many more.
And even if it was, I wouldn't be exactly. And even if it was, I wouldn't know. I have no. I don't know. I don't know enough. All I know is, you know, all I know is the importance of listening to someone else. But like, and obviously how delicate, like, the subject. I mean, like, you know, like, the thing is, it is a delicate subject because
it's controversial. It's controversial for sure, but I think it's important. I think it's really important. And I also think it's important. And like, if you ever meet someone who tries to shove statistics down your throat and says that, oh, rape culture isn't real and all this stuff isn't real, don't listen to them, because their statistics are based on studies.
Yeah.
Okay, and we already know that like a very large percentage of people who are assaulted don't talk to people about it. For years, sometimes for like 10 years. Or they don't tell the police. In fact, most rapes aren't reported. No. So how can you base your entire philosophy based on statistics that aren't even that not everyone is taking part in? You know.
I mean, I've had. He's a bloody stop smoking so much.
Yeah, you do.
I've had experiences with like, you know, with people and I've been sort of. I've experienced sexual misconduct or sexual, like, you know, that kind of thing myself, and God, you just feel like disgusted by everything. It's the strangest thing, and it took me a while to sort of like properly like get over it, if I even did. But I still like feel a bit like, you know, if I'm talking to someone who might be interested in me and I'm not interested in them, I do get that kind of like feeling in my stomach now, and I never got that. But I was very open. And very like, you know, love is love, kind of accepting people. And these experiences that I've had of just like, they did just like fuck with me a bit, you know, and crazy stuff.
It does more. You think about it being like this, because when you think of assault, you think of physical contact and doing damage to another person. But really, like, the main horror when it comes to sexual assault is the psychological effects.
Yeah.
It's relaying that. So it's PTSD. It's relaying that idea constantly. Oh, this horrible thing happened, and not being able to stop thinking about it, and it popping into your head while you're eating cereal, drinking coffee, driving to work. You know.
Yeah, man. And so you gotta like, geez, you've got to
If anyone out here is a rapist, stay in your house. Don't go outside. Just
what a thing to say.
Just stay inside. I'm not even joking. I've scum of the earth. I don't understand how you can do that to another person. I just don't. Scum of the earth.
Yeah, right. But I want to kind of like dial it back to like sort of ideology, like other people's opinions and stuff, so we don't talk too much about this sort of topic because I think it might be
Maybe what we should do is
it,
like
may,
have,
it might we should put a trigger warning in it because I'm not even
yeah,
joking.
maybe.
Yeah, we know we should because the conversation, because it's our first time doing this, and conversations do like kind of take their own evolved, they sort of evolve in their own thing, but
And I want to do
I'd
this.
rather dial I would like to dial it back from sexual assault.
We can,
sort of,
we can. I think what we should do is we should like have some kind of like time constraint for each topic. Maybe like
Yeah.
25 minutes tops.
well, we're on 30 minutes now, 30 minutes and 34 seconds. So, but anyway, yeah, but we can dial it back to, because we initially spoke about sexual assault from not listening to the other person's opinion, and that was a good topic, and it's less touchy. So, I was thinking maybe we could go back to that, and yeah. So I find that yeah. So and the problem is with not listening to the people's opinions, as we were saying, is that you
Anyway, yeah, that's what I was getting at. I felt very attacked.
with your story, right?
Yeah, I mean, I felt as if
Yeah.
my opinion didn't matter. It didn't matter what I believed because everybody else was like, "You're wrong,"
Yeah.
and you're a bad person for not
Yeah,
believing.
and it's less about the I think it's less about the assault and more about less about the opinions and more just the
You don't agree with what
yeah, exactly,
we're saying.
dissent, of course, yeah, and this can obviously take all forms.
And anyone can be, anyone can be exposed to this kind of behavior. I mean, like, and I don't even think that it's like gang mentality. I think like naturally we surround ourselves with people who agree with us or who on a fundamental level understand how we feel and care about how we feel. And I think that the reason why I felt so shit in that situation is these were people who I was very good friends with, and I felt personally attacked. I felt like my morals were being questioned, all because I thought that I agree I believe in a fair trial. I think that both people should be vetted equally, and that's got nothing to do. And I just want to preface this as the last thing I'll say about sexual assault.
Okay, yeah, because I would like to move on.
Nothing to do with sexual assault. I just think that in any case, whether it's a casual conversation with friends or you're in a court case, I feel like everyone deserves a fair trial, and that's it.
I mean, yeah, sure. You see 12 Angry Men. That's a nice little. It's literally just it's a film made in 1959 with Roger Fonda, James Fonda, I forget his name, and it's just 12 people in a courtroom in a jury. 12 people as a jury discussing the fate of one man's life, and he's yeah, and I think he's like Mexican, and he's been accused of killing his father, and they just they just go through every little thing that happened, and they sort of realize that every single very obviously convincing argument against him is definitely is not certain, and over time this one guy who says not guilty convinces everyone else that that he's innocent, which is it's a very good film. It's a very good film.
How do you feel about the death penalty?
Oh jeez. I don't know enough. I don't think the I don't like. I think I'm mainly against the death penalty because I don't think that the government should have that power to kill people, and we don't know. Like we said, we don't know what it means to once you kill someone, they're dead. They're dead as dead, man. And like, and of course, some people do bring up, some people have massacred loads of people, but like, Jesus, the government like should not have that power, in my opinion.
I mean, like, I don't know. My mum agrees with the death penalty, and I'm constantly arguing with her about it because I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong, but I can't deny that sometimes, like, my mum will sort of get me into a corner, and I'll have no idea how to get my way out of it because my mum's very good at arguing. But anyway, her whole philosophy is basically that the government. She works in the probation service.
She does, yeah, I don't know.
And it costs the government so much money to keep people in prison. And a lot of these people are people who have killed people inside and outside the prison and can't be contained. And in some parts of the world, and not everywhere, but in some parts of the world, it is actually illegal to keep prisoners in solitary confinement for too long a period of time. Yeah. So and they can't just torture a person forever until they die. So, and if there are risks to people themselves and to people outside and the inside of prison, what do you do with a person like that? That they could become responsible for killing even more people. So what do? You have it's like this. Oh well, do I kill this one guy, or do all these other people potentially die?
Yeah, right. Oh, geez, I don't.
It's hard. It's really hard, and I've stuck to my guns all these years. I still believe that the death penalty is wrong. I think it's murder. I don't think that we should be. I don't think that people should have the right to decide whether to die.
I do agree, because I do agree. Yeah, it is one of those sorts of things, isn't it?
But I love these moral dilemmas, man. I think they're amazing. Have you ever
like the trolley problem? You like the trolley problem?
I've not seen the trolley problem, but I've seen.
You like moral dilemmas, but you don't know what the trolley problem is.
I've seen the one with the cars where you it's like a test, and there's a car and a crossing.
It's very similar. It's like basically you got a bus, like a trolley as they call it, and the trolley is going to kill 5 people, and you can switch the track to another track, but that has 1 person tied down. So they got 5 people tied down on the way it's going, and then you got 1 person on the other track, and you have the option to switch. So the utilitarian will, of course, say to themselves, less people dying, that's good. But if you switch, you're deliberately killing someone. That's the problem. That's the problem with it. And
I mean, like there is a lot of variables. I mean, like a lot of things that like you're forced to think about. I remember looking at the test, and there was an old lady on one side and a man in a suit and a briefcase on the other. And I was thinking, well, it's currently going towards the man with the briefcase.
Yeah.
And I had these horrible thoughts. I was like, I can't believe I'm thinking about this. This is awful. But I was thinking, oh, well, this lady, she's probably not going to be alive for that much longer. She's probably going to die very quickly because she's an old lady.
Right.
She's an old lady, so she's probably going to die very quickly. She's probably not going to know what's happening.
This is the problem
the businessman, I was thinking, well, this guy is clearly quite successful. He could have quite a large impact on a number of people. He could be employing people.
Yeah.
And it's awful. I hated doing it. I hated it. But at the same time, I was like, wow, this really does make you think about it. It does sort of give you an idea of how to quantify the value of life.
I know, and I think it is like, because obviously in order to have, we're endowed with moral systems in our brains, and or whatever, whatever it is, whether it's a social thing or a biological thing or whatever. But the problem is that, in the real world, life shouldn't to quantify life in that way is such a dangerous thing to do.
It is, because it's mathematical.
Yeah, exactly.
Methodical. Yeah.
Exactly, but the problem is that we nonetheless have to do it. We still have to do these things, because Google's going to have these cars. Google's going to develop these self-driving cars, and they're going to have to make these moral choices. So we have to find something that we all agree on, and that's just this big old problem we got. And
and the thing is that I think that will create this whole leftist rightist argument.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
there will be people protesting. There'll be people protesting in the street about this.
I don't think it's a leftist rightist thing. I think it's far more complicated. I think there's a lot. I think it's a utilitarian virtue ethics.
Yeah.
Deontologist thing. You got the three main schools of philosophy, which is virtue ethics, the belief that some things like courage and love are inherently virtuous, and those things should be come towards. The utilitarian view is the view that more happiness and pleasure is, for the most people is good. And then you have deontology, which believes that we have certain moral rules that we need to follow. And I write in the book that I'm writing that the problem with these 3 moral systems is that they don't really they don't really, in the language we have them, they don't really fit together into one moral unit, which is why we're constantly facing these moral dilemmas. We're like, oh, well, what is the right choice? And we can never find them out. But nonetheless, if you look at like nature in the real world, I think we should look back to sort of the natural and the real world, to realize that these moral systems are lingual, and the problem with them is that they don't speak the same language. And this is my theory. And my theory is that they don't speak the same language, in the same way that you can't decide what a better virtue is, having sex, having food, or listening to a song you like, because they're not they're not only the virtues different, but the quanta of the virtues is also different. They speak different languages, so you can't pin them up against each other to find which one is superior. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So my idea is that these moral systems nonetheless exist, and we may discover new moral systems as we, besides the three, as we continue, philosophical course, if we last that long as a species. But but we need to understand both that they don't speak the same language, and that even if they did speak the same language, they wouldn't directly represent reality, because language does not directly represent reality. It carries its own assumptions of what it means to be moral. You can't just say this person is moral, because you're also saying this person is moral and that's a good thing, and that's not directly in the word moral. It's the assumption that is carried through the subtext of language. And the big problem is that the big problem is that we obviously know what is good and what is bad in the immediate everyday.
But when it comes to making serious decisions, it becomes harder.
Yeah, when it comes to make paradoxical, exactly, and exactly, and the problem is that you want to say that there is no moral choice, but that's not a good answer, and you want to say there's one moral choice, that's not good either. So rather, I think the idea is that they are different moral systems that exist at different parts of the brain, and you can serve one, or you can serve the other, or you can serve the other, and you can't serve all of them. But they're all still moral in their own right. The problem with moral is that we've created that word moral out of the world, and we found it useful to talk about. But if moral doesn't point to anything, this is what Wittgenstein spoke about in his Tractatus. You have statements that just don't mean anything, and he believed that a lot of moral statements don't mean anything. And I actually agree with you. I actually agree with him because we use the word moral because it's useful to talk about in like an everyday situation, and then we try and apply that word to very complex and paradoxical situations, and we can't do it. Not because there's something wrong with the world, but because the word moral just doesn't quite fit with this context. The moral just simply doesn't work with this thing. But we pride language as having this like metaphysical transcendent quality over reality, and this is the problem with Plato. You end up saying he was like, oh, what is the perfect chair, what is the perfect mug, and it's like, it doesn't fucking exist, man. It's just like that's kind of obvious when you think about it, but it might take a little while to actually get to that conclusion. I mean, it did for me, and it took a long time to get to the conclusion for me. Yeah. Sorry, I'm really speaking a lot here, but yeah, it is.
I think it's just important. I mean, this is more of an everyday life approach to what you're talking about. But I think that generally, unless someone else's moral view is hurting you or other people, just leave them to their own devices. Don't. Yeah, just everyone's got a different idea, and I feel like when it comes to these really taboo subjects, like, should we, punish people capitally?
Yeah.
Or, should we run over an old lady or a businessman? Or, I think it's just important that we accept that, I mean, like, what's it called when you vote for, when everyone sort of votes, and then
unanimous.
The majority,
Unanimous? Oh.
the majority is the moral. That's the moral choice because the vast majority of people picked it. What's that called?
Oh, geez, there is a word for it. I don't know what the word is.
Because that's kind of what I think should be the.
Then you get like a tyranny of the majority on the minority.
I know.
For example, if the majority,
there's flaws in every moral.
There is, but you gotta think about them. For example, in a country with a majority of white people, the majority of white people may have may make decisions that have an are institutionally or like subversively racist decisions about these moral choices. And this is the problem with the more of the majority. So it is finding something that works, but more importantly, it's I think a better question is, why do you want to work? What are you trying to achieve? Like,
Sorry, can you repeat that? You broke up a bit there.
Sorry, yeah. I think an important choice. I think an important question to ask when you are programming these cars or making these moral choices is, what do you really want to achieve? Like, what is your end goal? Are you trying to satisfy? Like, and I don't. It's a hard question, but like, because to merely speak of something as moral
I
doesn't
know
really mean.
it's yeah, you're right, but at the same time, we have to make certain decisions,
Yeah.
and we have to use a moral philosophy, like in order to solve them.
I
Like,
don't agree. I think we need to. I think we need to
I
rewrite the
know.
language
I
that
mean
these
for
three
I
moral
mean for
systems.
a specific issue. So, like, say you've got the American government, and they're like, okay, we have capital punishment in all these cities. Okay, we're
Yeah.
either gonna relinquish that, and there's gonna be no capital punishment, or we're gonna have capital punishment in every city,
I
every
don't know.
state,
I,
every
I
state.
don't know. I don't know.
And if they're gonna make a decision like that, how do they make that decision
Yeah, I know,
without one moral philosophy?
yeah, but I don't agree. I don't agree that every moral. I don't agree. It's like a moral gentrification, in my opinion. You would end up making everyone. Why do you want every city to have the same outcome? Why?
It's just so that both sides are fair. That's the only reason why I do it.
But I mean, like the problem is that like if you make why where do you stop if you want to make every opinion every political, social, and moral decision unanimous, then where do you stop? Like, surely then you have tribes that kill each other. Should we step in there, and should we get them to have the
Yeah, but
same morals?
if they're not part of the society's rules, then they don't have to follow our rules.
Yeah, but like, who's to say? But who's to say that like, that there is just two forms of society. You have like Western society, and then you have tribes, and the
But
Western
let's
society.
say
And
let's say for argument's sake that we are talking about the Western world. We're talking about
sure.
Western society.
Yeah.
So how do you quantify the value of life, and how do you make a decision? Like, should capital punishment exist? Should we?
But why? Yes, but why should what you were saying is and I'm not jumping on you, I hope, but like, why must every moral decision be exactly the same in every city? And that's the problem, because I do want to say this. I'm sorry if it's a little off topic, but like, I think I should say it, to say that Western society is all one solid unit just doesn't is not only bad, it's all not only like kind of problematic, but it's very wrong as well. What about Amish civilizations? What about people that simply don't communicate with the outside world? You have entire villages and towns that don't need to. They might still have cars, and they may even have Google cars, but they may have completely different moral systems that guide their communities. And the problem is
But
that
wouldn't you argue then that if they're not really taking part in that community, that they're not really a part of it?
no, but like, what do you? I mean, the problem is that what do you mean by big society? Does that? What do you? I mean, I'm questioning.
I'm not asking. I'm not. That's not what I'm asking you. What? The only question I'm asking is,
Yeah, go on.
how do you quantify
Yeah, go on. Yeah,
human
okay,
life?
okay.
How do you quantify it, and how do you make a very, very serious decision using all these multiple moral philosophies? You can only use one. That's my point.
Um,
You
you can
can't
use
have you can't have multiple going at once. You can only make one decision.
Yes, well, I think it's a very big question. In all honesty, I think it's a very big question.
It's a hard question to answer.
Obviously,
it's
if I could,
and it's also
if I could answer that, I would be very, yeah. Go on.
it's also rhetorical though. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, right.
Because you can't. Like, that's what I'm saying is you can't make a decision like that
yeah.
You can only make one decision, and you have to find the well. You don't have to, but you should use the correct moral position. But everyone's moral position differs, and everyone has a different idea of what that is.
That's the interesting thing, because and every moral position should be different. It shouldn't, and it's important because we're all different people. But like, I think it's interesting, and this may not be your argument as you are sort of moving away from it. But the idea that the entire of society has to conform to one moral philosophy is really, really it's fascistic. It's fascistic.
But how else do you do it?
You let individual communities, you bring it down to individual communities, and you let them
in order for that to work, you'd have to have people from the community come into a jury, and then individuals would come in and be like, okay, no, we don't want this person to die, and then the next person will come in, and then another group of people will come in and be like, oh, actually, this person should die, and then everyone has their say, but there's no cement decision, there's no cement way in which we do capital punishment. We can't make everyone happy. There has to be a way to make that decision.
I mean, I kind of agree with like a more sort of, so one town advocates capital punishment. I mean, I don't advocate capital punishment, but let's just say that capital punishment was up for choice onto which one was right. I'm not saying it is, but let's just say it is. I would say that one community having this choice about capital punishment and one community this choice, I think there should be a variation, because and it's not just about moralism. It's also about the variation of life, man. But I mean it. But I mean it though, because like,
man,
I mean it because to make everyone to make everyone conform to if we had Mr. Mellon, Mr. Needle Drop, and he really did prescribe what music people should listen to, and everyone had the same music taste, it'd be fucking boring. It'd be boring.
Do you know what the concept of a hypothetical is?
Yes.
Do you know what a hypothetical is? That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing with you, man. Right. Let's for the sake of a hypothetical, because I really want you to agree with me here. But with a hypothetical world where only one town exists and there's no other. Yeah. There's one society, no other societies. There's no tribes. Yeah. There's no people who stay at home and don't go outside and don't vote. Everyone votes.
Sounds fucking awful. Sounds
awful. But in this incredibly unrealistic world that I have created for this question, okay?
Yeah.
Everyone has the same rights. They all get a chance to vote. How do you quantify how do you quantify the value of someone's life?
Fuck your big town. Fuck your big town.
You keep adding all these variables, but these people are in the 1% bracket.
Okay. Let's say that even then that every town gets wiped out except one town. We could use that.
Oh my god, dude! It's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical question, man.
So okay. In your hypothetical, the entire world has to have one moral philosophy.
That's what I'm saying.
But I don't. Yes, but okay.
I know there are different cities in America, and they all have different ways of looking at the world and viewing the world. But they're also individual societies.
But I'm not saying that. Okay, but I don't know, because the thing is that town is a completely different world to mine.
I guess what I'm saying is I'm more trying to make a statement. I'm more trying to say that you can only have one way per society, and whether or not some people agree or not, there has to be a decision. Right. They can't just ignore, because if you ignore the situation altogether and you don't make a decision, then things will it will be either way. It'll be like, okay, well, people will continue to die through capital punishment, and that's just how it's going to be, or people won't die anymore from capital punishment. But what I'm saying is, there has to be a decision. Someone has to make that decision, and it's how do you quantify the value of that person's life, and who makes that decision? That's what I'm asking.
Okay, I believe. Okay, I understand. Who makes the decision? I how you quantify human life and who makes the decision to choose are two different questions. And how do you quantify life is a question that no moral philosopher has ever answered. I don't think,
I
like
don't
at least
know, man.
conclusively. But like, that's not really the point. I'm saying that I mean, the only way you could possibly, you know, the only way you could possibly get a decision is direct democracy, having people decide on it. I mean, that's my opinion, because like, you know,
That's what I've been trying to edge you towards.
Yeah.
That was my point from the beginning.
Right. Well,
was that like I think you would have to have people vote, and for it to be a majority, and the majority would get and that would be morally just.
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, like, you could have, like, I mean, not necessarily, because let's say 60% of the people vote for utilitarianism and 40% of the people vote for deontology. You could have the Google cars have it by chance, you know, so 60% chance that it's utilitarian, 40% chance that it's deontology, and that might be kind of leaving things up to chaos. But that's that, you know, which is kind of bad, but that's okay because life is chaotic. But it also removes that tyranny of the majority, that need for the majority to have the complete power over the 40%, which would only lead to just terror and civil war. I think, you know, well, maybe not that bad, but like, it would be quite bad. But I think having a randomized generator in accordance to who voted for what, and obviously if you had a computer to do it, then everyone would have a different opinion on everything, and you could put it all into one system. You know, and it's all like this. I mean, obviously the problem is that does everyone get to decide if that's a random generator?
The problem is, okay, so let's assume, I'm going to entertain your idea. So let's just can we try and how are we collecting this data? Because I feel like that's important.
Okay, we can do it online. We'll assume that there's no hackers.
Is it active research?
So it's like, yeah. So you have 100 questions on what to do in situations, and let's say a town of 100 people vote on those 100 questions.
We can't do that.
What do you mean?
Because there's so like right. So I don't know. Let's look at like an incredibly overly populated city like or state like California.
Sure.
So say that
millions. Yeah.
Yeah, literally. So like, you know, we have a questionnaire maybe. A questionnaire with like 100 questions on it.
Yep.
Who is reading these millions and millions of questionnaires?
The computers. The computers can do it. The computers can quantify it.
But who's making this program that quantifies all these answers, all these incredibly unique answers? Exactly. So the problem is what I'm getting at is that these questions would have to be predetermined. And someone would have to pick through these questions which ones that they think. But the problem with that is that a lot of people are going to feel like their questions aren't being asked. Yeah. And these things can be manipulated. And that could be morally unjust. So I do not think that could work. I think the only way that we can live morally is democracy. That's why I'm a Democrat, dude.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, fuck your big town. But you are really pushing me towards giving you an answer.
It's a debate. It's the whole point. It's a debate.
Of course. And but like I want to point out another problem with the city generator, the randomized, because I was proposing having it random, so 60% utilitarian, 40% deontology. The problem is that who chooses it to be randomized like that in the first place? Do you put it to a vote? And and the thing is, and that's
that could go on forever.
And it
does for everything. Yeah.
It does go on forever, and it's like, you know, how do you decide which system chooses which system to pick? And obviously, it would never end. So you'd have to stop.
I think people would lose. Would lose interest as well. I think people would get sick of voting.
Well, obviously, you could never start. And this is the problem with conceptual and lingual based ways of looking at the world, because you need them, because they are communication is very important. But once it becomes logical and sensical in the instrumental language that we have now, you run into all sorts of paradoxes. But the paradoxes are entirely to do with our language, not to do with the world. In my opinion. So it may appear that that there's a problem with the world because we can't answer these moral questions, but I do believe it's entirely to do with our language, and it comes down to and the thing is that you can never seem to arrive at a solution, no matter how much thought you put into it.
So you think that the problem is that we can't communicate?
Yes,
properly.
Because I mean the problem. Yeah. No. It's not that we can't communicate properly. It's that the communication itself is flawed. You can't. You literally cannot arrive at a solution, because in order to arrive at a solution you must communicate, but communication comes with its own assumptions. I mean, you can't prove that language is even valid because because in order to prove it you need to come up with some lingual proof. That's the problem. You end up like you just end up regressing and regressing and regressing, and you never stop. You can't, because that's the problem. For example, in my book I sort of say for example, just talking about the word black and black and white. Think about black and white, right? Just saying black and its opposite white have all sorts of assumptions. And the first one I write is that black refers to its reference properly, so its meaning properly. So that thing is black. And then you'll say that's an assumption because we can't prove it. And the problem is that the reason you can't prove it is because let's say you came up with some proof, like I called it majority theory. So if the majority of people know what I mean when I say black, then it means black, right? And then you have to say prove that's the real theory. And then let's say you have, like black and white, you have majority theory and non-majority theory in the other line. And then the thing about majority theory is that it has an assumption that majority theory points to its referent properly. And then you're like, well, how do you prove that? And you can't ever stop. So I was talking to Sam Page-Nair. This might be a nice way to finish up the podcast, because it'd be a nice finish, and it's been an hour, and I need to use the bathroom really badly. But he was talking about, I forget the philosopher or the literary writer, and if he's listening, he'll probably tell me in the comments if he listens this far. But he says, "So it goes," and it's just this. It's just this thing that clears all of the lingual problems, and so it goes. And it became a mantra to him, as he told me. It's just when you have all these these mental cramps, as Wittgenstein said, you're completely mentally cramped. The answer is so it goes. With moral systems, something bad happened, so it goes. I can't prove that black is real, but I know it's real, so it doesn't matter. That's the thing. I know this is black. I can't prove that it's black, but it is black, and I know it's black. So that's all. I can't prove this is the right thing to do, but it is the right thing to do. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. And
I don't know if you can do that with. I don't know if you can do that with capital punishment, though. You can't say, "Oh well, so it goes." Yeah, this guy's gonna die. This guy's gonna die.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. If you can come up with another answer, maybe for the next podcast. This has been Long Live Podcast. I'm James Reardon Waters, or Jimmy Waters, and this has been my very good friend Nate Boddington, and we have spoken about happiness, ideologies, opinions, and moral systems with Google cars, I believe. And that can be the title of this when we eventually do it. All right, lovely to see you, Nate. Take it easy. And have a good day. Have a good day, everyone listening. And if there's anything that you'd like us to podcast about next, or you have any thoughts about what we spoke about, please put them in the comments. And we'll see you next week. Wonderful, wonderful. Long live podcasts. Long live podcast.